everybody. The time is 6 o'clock, so we will go ahead and call this meeting to order. We'll go ahead and call roll call to have it on the record. Mr. Wiley?
Present.
Ms. Chambers?
Present.
Mr. Wells?
Present.
And I myself am present. And Mr. Ireland? All right, not present at the moment. All right, so I see first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. So has everybody had a chance to review the agenda for tonight's meeting? I assume so. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right, so the first item of substance on the agenda is review of proposals for legal representative. And this is for the specific to the DA/DDA regarding issuance of bonds and business of that nature. Would you guys feel comfortable waiting for Sylvia to get back in this conversation? I'm not sure we have a whole lot to
Yeah,
discuss
because,
about
just in case she has
laying a
something to
baseline.
add.
Mhm.
Right, and she usually lays a good baseline for us to kind of start from, so we'll go ahead and pause for a moment if everybody's comfortable with that.
Sure.
Okay.
I think we're probably past that too, since they already made the hire. The legal representative.
That's
Oh, the
He's
city.
the city's
city
attorney.
city attorney, so I think we're talking about,
We will have our own,
So he's not,
no,
oh,
he's just sitting in.
oh,
He's not our.
city council.
okay.
Mhm. That's my understanding.
Yes. Yeah.
This is specific for,
Just the DDA and the DA.
The Development Authority.
right. Afternoon.
Hi.
Oh, I see, okay, so
That's why I asked.
the answer is yes,
got
then,
locked
the
out.
door is locked.
He got locked
My timing, I got lucky.
Sylvia was
Hey,
out
Todd,
there.
How are you?
All right. Well, she let me in. And she said she had to go through something.
Oh, okay, uh-oh. She left us to fend for ourselves. Okay. Well, the challenge here, folks, and my mind is that we haven't really had a chance to discuss or catch up with what exactly decision needs to be made here. So I think I'd like to have a little guidance on that.
I agree.
Our administrator. We're gonna go ahead and sit tight if everybody's okay with that. We don't have any presentations of any kind, doesn't appear. So just reviewing proposals. I'll move the mic as well. Okay,
I hear a door.
I do too.
Make sure no one else is locked out.
Right, yeah, that's why I
Hey,
asked.
there we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
I asked Jeff, I said, was it locked when you?
Ah, hello, everyone. We've missed a lot. We called the meeting to order and did roll call. And we've approved the agenda. Beyond that,
Do we need to add Mr. Ireland to the roll?
not much. That's a good question. We did call roll before Mr. Ireland entered the room. Should we do that again? Just to have it on the record? Okay. We'll go ahead and call roll once again, just to have this on the record. Mr. Ireland?
Here.
Mr. Wells?
Present.
Ms. Chambers?
Present.
Mr. Wiley?
Present.
And present. Everyone here is present. We do have a quorum. All right, thank you. Okay. All right, so we've already approved the agenda as it stands. The next item on the agenda was review of proposals for legal representative.
During our previous Development Authority meeting, we presented before the authority recommendations for bond counsel or counsel for the Development Authority. The board requested the opportunity to look at additional proposals, which are those that are placed before you today. Those proposals, we submitted them at least 2 to 3 weeks for the board to review. And tonight, we would like to consider your discussion regarding the proposals from McGuire Woods, Hardwick Law Firm, Greenberg Trarick, and Dan McCray.
It's open discussion.
It's an open discussion, yes.
And you said Dan McCray?
Yes, so Dan McCray's information was a link. We did request a written proposal. So we do have the link, the information regarding his background and experience.
The floor is open for discussion, so.
I guess my first question would be, what's our budget?
So many of all of the proposals that have been submitted are basically services that are provided at no initial cost to the Development Authority. They take their fee schedule from deals as they come available. And those percentages are based upon a scope of work. If you look at all of the proposals, they will indicate what their level of experience, but they do detail that there are no initial fees. We can further request from each of the proposing firms that they provide us with, a specific scope of work, if the board so chooses.
Would they be comfortable disclosing their fee schedule? Is that common in that industry?
So the fee schedules are based upon the deals. We can ask them for generalizations.
Okay.
And again, we can give them a scope of work that we would like them to provide, what that fee structure will be. I'm also going to defer to Ms. Knoll. Are there any additional requirements or requests that we can make to accommodate the board's request?
No, I think that's sufficient. And typically what bond counsel or authority counsel will do is when they're calculating their fees, they look at the size of the transaction and they cap their fees at a certain percentage of whatever the size of the transaction is. But when they're doing that fee calculation, they also look at the complexity of the transaction so that they can, estimate how much time, how much complexity is involved, and then come up with a fee, but make sure that it does not exceed a certain percentage of whatever the total amount of the transaction is.
Okay.
So they can give you, that's a long way of saying, they can give you a hypothetical
Right.
example of if the deal structure is X and the amount of the transaction is Y, we can come up with a fee of Z.
Understood, thank you.
Now, I know McGuire Woods did give pricing. It was more of per hour
Right.
pricing point. Greenberg, it was pretty vague. It was basically, we will work with you, which is pretty wide open. And then Hardwick, I don't recall it saying anything
Right.
about pricing.
And Dan McCray mentioned that his would be based upon the deal fee structure.
Got it, okay. And so I was just asking, and I just thought about when McGuire Wood stated that, let's just say it was $6.50 an hour, do we have, so,
So based upon and that's one of the things that we're in the process of updating. We'll be updating our treasurer. One of the things that's on this evening's agenda is the banking documents,
Okay.
so that we can arrange for the treasurer to meet with our finance director and get a full scale as to where the figures are for the Development Authority. At present, it would not be advisable to take on an hourly agreement, only because there are not funds in the account sufficient to accommodate.
got it. Okay, so that leads me to my next question. We would only be using these attorneys for lack of a better word, deals.
Right, if we looked at today's agenda, and I'm so glad that you brought up that question, Mr. Wiley. There are, all of the items that are on our agenda will require legal counsel, maybe except for the Fairburn Main Street committees. And I would like for Ms. Knoll to talk a little bit about why it's important that we deal with this review and in a timely fashion identify attorneys that we would need to represent the Fairburn Development Authority. Ms. Knoll?
So it's my understanding that the authority currently has one transaction that is being considered, and another transaction that is in the offing. And in order for you to have, your dedicated counsel, we need to get them on board. Because although we are city attorney for the city of Fairburn, authorities are separate legal entities from the cities that establish them or that activate them. So it makes sense for the authority to actually have their own counsel. And one of the issues that your new council may recommend is that you update your bylaws, because your bylaws are a little outdated. They're about 11 years old is the last version that I have. And if you are having new council come on board, it's better for them, to advise you about the parameters of that new set of bylaws.
Question. So the bond counsel would double as the authority counsel also?
That is my understanding of their proposals. Now, the way that most authorities hire their counsel, you do have your regular board counsel, and those board counsel are typically bond counsel. They do bond work, so it makes sense for them to serve in that role, because a lot of the advice that they're providing to you is not just about, corporate governance, it's about the transactions that you'll be engaged in. So that's a very common model for engagement.
With that in mind, has his staff made any type of recommendation in their review
Well,
to the authority?
the proposal that are presented to you are basically a fair composite of attorneys that both have the years of experience, have the capacity, and have the willingness to work for the City of Fairburn Development Authority. We have looked at one of the first for your consideration, has quite extensive experience. He does a lot of the training. That's Dan's group. As a city, though, we leave that decision up to the authority.
Would our counsel be here in place of you?
That's correct.
So with that structure it's a package payment, you see what I'm saying? So if we're gonna meet 10 times, if we're trying to up our meetings, what I'm trying to figure out is, how do we, the cost, and how do we know
That's a great question. So Dan's group has decided, or I shouldn't say decided, has offered to represent the council with only charging on deals.
Got it.
Okay.
McGuire's is hourly.
Yes.
Hardwick, I believe, has also have the same recommendation as Dan's group. There may be some additional fees just based upon what they allude to in their proposal. And then Greenberg, again, is that they are based upon the fee structure.
Got it.
So with that said, I think what the council or the authority will need to look at is based upon the nature and the structure of how we do our meetings, who's best suited
Right.
for Fairburn's dynamic, both from a training knowledge base, who is going to offer the most assistance for the amount of resources that we have. That's pretty much what you should consider.
Got it. Do we know where Dan is based out of, offhand?
Yes, he is local,
Oh, he's
Georgia.
In Atlanta.
What city?
in Atlanta?
He's in Atlanta.
Okay.
Yeah, damn it.
Excuse me, I know this is open discussion, but do we make a motion if we decide on one, just to kind of get the ball rolling?
Well, this evening, what is recommended is that we reserve that for June.
Okay.
Is that correct? Okay. So this evening, we would like for you to take this opportunity to discuss what's important for the board. If there are any questions or any follow-up information that you want us to find out, we can do so if there are any specific questions that you have regarding the proposals.
I know after looking over all the brochures, I thought that McGuire, like, as I read through it, answered all my questions as I kept going. Like, if there was a question that popped up, it was very thorough. Greenberg, is it Greenberg?
Yes.
I thought was second. Dan, I thought was third, and Hardwick, I thought was at the bottom. That's my take.
And that may be a starting point for us, if everyone can just give their comments of ranking. And when you said that most thorough, given the cost, the fee structure of McGuire, what are your thoughts about that, Mr. Wiley?
McGuire? Well, tons of experience and with big projects. Like I said, as I read through it and questions were coming about, as I kept going through his brochure, answered tons of my questions. I just thought it went more detailed into projects opposed to just basic deals.
So this had the case studies, yeah.
Yeah, I
actual
just,
Case studies where you can align
Right.
with, right.
Yeah, and it did, I thought that they were the only one that actually gave a price. Greenberg did not. It just said, we will work with you. Hardwick did not, and I don't recall if Dan did.
Yeah, right. Dan has agreed to work with us just based upon.
Got it. Now, with that question asked, though, would Dan be here if he's only going to do deals?
So, from my understanding, Dan is a part of CFARth, and they have an extensive staff, so they would have, he and/or a staff attorney would be present
Got it.
during each of our meetings.
Okay. All right.
So I have a general question. As I was reading through it, and some of these deals, it sounds like some of them were involved, each firm was involved in, how does that work? It's not like one attorney handled one deal. I noticed that some of them say they were part of the same deal in this profile. How does more than one attorney get involved in it?
Depending on the size and the complexity of the transaction, there can be a room full of lawyers working on a deal, and they're working on various aspects of the deal. So one lawyer or one firm may be serving in the role of bond counsel. Another firm may be serving in the role of underwriters counsel, representing the bankers. Another firm may be serving in the role of disclosure counsel, and they handle all of the compliance issues from a Securities and Exchange Commission standpoint and an IRS standpoint. Then you can have an issuer's counsel who represents whatever entity is issuing the bonds, whether that's a city, a county, or an authority. Did I leave anyone out? Then you can have trustees counsel. So there are a number of different roles, and that's why you may see some of these firms appearing on the same transactions.
Ms. Chambers, did you want to rank the proposals or take more time? What are your thoughts?
Well, I like the all-inclusive approach.
Okay,
McCray. I like that
okay.
approach to it. These other firms, they're big firms. They're really big firms. They handle a lot of big things. You know, I didn't see a lot of small cities involved in a lot of this.
Okay.
You know, it's really big ones. So I'm kind of leaning.
Towards McRae? Okay. Mr. Hadaway?
The fee structure makes me nervous with McGuire Woods. That's the only major objection I have with that proposal. However, it is thorough. Gives me more information than anything else. Yeah, I would have to go, I'd have to go McRae, probably Greenberg, McGuire Woods, and then Hardwick, in that order.
And one of the things that we can do is of the top two, we can have them come in.
Sure.
Yeah. So McRae, Greenberg, McGuire, and then, did I hear
Hardwick.
Brett Harvey?
Mhm. Yes.
Mr. Wells?
You know, I don't feel that I'm ready to really rank them yet,
Okay.
because obviously they're all qualified. It's, without talking to them, it's kind of hard to, you know what I mean? It's kind of hard to really put your finger on, because anybody can put together a slick presentation. I want to know what's behind all the.
Was there any, the purpose of the ranking is to identify two to bring back. So what are your thoughts, as there as particular firm that you would like to see come in?
No, there isn't, and that's why I asked about a staff recommendation, because obviously the attorney is going to have to be working very closely with staff. So I wanted to know who staff was comfortable with working with out of, you know, the people that have submitted a proposal.
Okay.
Okay, and then once I know who you're comfortable with, then I can I can dive a little deeper into, do I see any problems with them?
Okay. So what we will prepare is staff recommendation, and we will give you why we are recommending one firm over the other.
Yeah, because you gotta, if you're not happy with them, then
You'll
they're
spend a
not.
lot more time with them than we will.
Right.
Right.
So we will go ahead and prepare that
Right.
for the authority to review. Again, we're taking this opportunity to allow for that open discussion. We know that tonight that we won't vote. The rankings was basically to get an idea of those who we would invite. We have obviously 3 proposals, and we want to have that person to come back and talk to you all directly. Because while staff can make recommendations, we also want the board to have familiarity and comfort as well. Mr. Island, was there any of the firms, what were your thoughts?
Yes, in fact, I agree with all our counterparts. We're small business owners. So like Mr. Chambers, I lean towards the small business person. So Dan McRae will be the first on my list. As far as whipping up a nice presentation, I agree with the gentleman next to me. Anyone can do that. So until we really speak with them and find out who's going to give us the most bang for the buck, it's kind of hard to say. So bringing back 2, if I had to make a decision, I do really like the information I saw about McGuire, and that's mainly because it had a lot of information here locally in Georgia, even though it was a large company. So I would like to see McGuire and Dan McRae come and give a presentation where we can ask them questions.
Awesome. All right.
Ms. Abernathy, may I? And one thing to remember is that the board is hiring counsel. Anytime you hire counsel, they work for you. So you get to ask them whatever questions, you know, get them to address whatever concerns you have, including about how much they will charge you and for what particular services they will charge you for. And what you will find is that most attorneys are willing to negotiate their fees. Because I think all of the proposers, they're, you know, pretty smart people, and they understand there's a huge difference between City of Fairburn and, say, City of Atlanta from a budgetary standpoint. So if they proposed, I have to believe that they put some thought into whether they want to be of service to a smaller city like ours.
You know, I don't see fee is the major you know, point in this thing, because if it's baked into the deal, we really want to know, if you come to these meetings, the 10 that we're voting on, how are you going to handle that? You know what I mean? So the individual deals that come before us, that's not out of our pocket anyway, okay? So as long as they don't get greedy on the deals, you know, and they show up 10 times, I mean, we're good.
Mr. Pike, did you want to chime in? I know that you have had some experience as a consultant in working with many of these attorneys. Okay.
Was there any further discussion? If not, then we'll pick this back up on our next meeting in June, where we'll have potentially a couple presentations and a recommendation from staff as a prerequisite to that meeting. So let's go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda, letter of support for South City Partners.
So South City Partners has provided us with a letter of support outlining the Development Authority's recommendation to Mayor and Council to move forward with the tax abatement. Also, the tax abatement would include $265,000, as well as service officers guaranteeing that on their new development, at least 20% of those units would be dedicated to first-line workers, or, Fairburn police officers, with a preference given to Fairburn police officers. This item is really no longer, you all have voted for it in support. At this point, it is the next step is going to be for the attorneys to put that together. I have been advised that the attorney has to be in place before we can take further action on that. I don't know whether you want to have further discussion on what that process looks like, but it looks like June will be the time where a resolution will be put in place regarding the support for that tax and the structure of that tax abatement. The reason for doing so is to make sure the filing is done correctly, and although the board has unanimously voted to approve, there is a legal structure that has to be in place for those processes. Was there any other comment from city legal counsel?
I don't have any comment.
What were you-
The board's not voting on the attorney until June, so they can't then turn around and put this on there for the application.
Can we call a special meeting?
We can call a special meeting. The point of that discussion was basically saying that it had to be, the legal counsel has to be put in place first. And then thereafter, once the legal counsel is in place, then we will bring this back as, to be filed appropriately. And I don't even know that it has to be brought back. The document just has to be created and filed, correct? Since it's already been voted on? Correct.
So we can vote on a letter of support today.
Well, in a previous meeting, you already voted to support.
We've already done that.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
already done. So tonight, we were going to introduce the but that doesn't have to be done, so this agenda item can be, just go ahead and file.
Go ahead and
So
table it for the
Yeah,
next
but
meeting.
that's just the give
Okay.
the board. There was a question, one of our board members did call and ask about the process of where this was, and we did want to update the board as to the process where we were in it.
Understood. Great. Any further discussion on this item? No? Okay, we'll move on. So next item on the agenda, bank and legal document requirements.
So the Development Authority does require its own separate bank. Up until this time, the Development Authority funds have been kept in general, have been kept with the city of Fairburn. There is a need and a requirement for a bank account. So this evening, we are introducing a resolution for the board to sign. The resolution basically establishes, in keeping with the bylaws, that Mr. Jet Hadaway, the chair, and Mrs. Patricia Chambers, the treasurer, are the signatories on the bank account. So I will provide this to each of the board members. If you are in agreement, please sign the document, and we will file it accordingly. Were there any questions about this?
No.
Okay. All right, so we will have a vote on this resolution.
Do we have a motion to approve?
Aye.
We have a motion. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries.
Okay, all right.
Day, 24th.
Guess I should probably look at it before I sign it, right?
Okay. Thank you, board members. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is the amendment to the bylaws for the meeting schedules being the fourth Wednesday of the month, so 10 meetings annually.
So on this agenda item, we previously discussed this, but we decided not to take any action because we were going to have the meetings as needed. The challenge is we are not able to arrive at a quorum if we continue to have the meetings on Tuesday. So for that reason, we will need to amend the bylaws because the bylaws expressly state that there are meetings quarterly and that they are on the fourth Tuesday of the month. I mean, fourth Tuesday of the month. So with that said, I do believe that it does require a vote, and then we are to put the document in writing as well. Is that what was recommended?
Correct. Your current bylaws require a vote for amendments. I spoke with Ms. Abernathy earlier today, and my recommendation is that although you can vote to do that amendment, since your bylaws are in need of some updating, don't vote to make that amendment. go ahead and get your new council in place, have them.
Get it all
you know,
done.
Provide you
Same
with
time.
new updated bylaws, and then you'll have all of the changes that you need. And in the meantime, you can just call special call meetings so that you meet on the days that you want to meet.
Great. Okay.
My question is, how does that affect our June meeting?
Your June meeting,
Yes, will that be on the last Tuesday?
that will be whatever date. Okay, so you have meetings that are supposed to occur on the fourth Tuesday of the month. You can cancel that June meeting, the one that's regularly scheduled, because that's what's scheduled per your current bylaws. You can cancel that just by posting a notice in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. Then you can call a special call meeting, again, by giving notice in accordance with the Open Meetings Act, and have your meeting on the day where you'll have a quorum.
Okay, so that would mean that the fourth Wednesday of the month of June is June 28th.
Right.
And so we would need to go ahead and do a specially called meeting for June 28th. I will go ahead and make a note of that, because we already know that we will not have a quorum if we have the meeting on that Tuesday.
Right. Does anybody have an immediate conflict with that date? Nope.
No.
Okay. All right, that should work. Okay, so we'll table that item as well for vote. Once we've hired new council, we can get everything done at the same time, I think. That makes sense. All right,
So we're moving right along.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, per
Time that we're
usual.
within the hour.
Yeah, we're getting pretty good at this.
Yes.
All right, so last item on the agenda, Fairburn Main Street committees.
So back in 2017, when the Fairburn Main Street was created in the city of Fairburn, although the Main Street program would not start for another 2 years after 2019, it was decided at that point that the Development Authority would have a role in the administration of the Main Street program. In 2019, the Main Street program was officially implemented, and another resolution was established that the Development Authority would act in some capacity as being the Main Street Board. Subsequently, we also created a Main Street Board, and the Development Authority and Downtown Development Authority chairs acted as the chairs of the Main Street Board with additional members. There has since been some changes to that process. So what is before the Development Authority now is a decision to, number one, function as the board for the Main Street and/or create subcommittees for the Main Street Board. I do have some information. Is everyone familiar with Main Street?
Yes.
Okay. Pretty much.
Somewhat, I need a little clarification.
Okay, so we'll provide just some general overview, and then we'll talk about possible committees.
Great.
Is there like a clicker? Okay, sounds good. Okay, so basically, the Main Street program is a part of downtown development through the Georgia Main Street program. Next slide, please. A little bit about the history. The program was founded in 1980. There's 100+ programs. They have more than a $6 billion impact nationwide. They, on average, bring about 77,000 jobs to different communities. And in Georgia, it's one of the first states in the country to embrace the Main Street movement. That shows the national impact. So if from seeing that slide, you know that the Main Street is a grassroots approach that's not going anywhere. If anything, it is helping to make sure local economies thrive. Next slide. In Georgia, that is just a composite of the programs, and they have added more programs since this particular document was created. Next slide. In terms of rehabilitation, Main Street programs are key to rehabilitation of downtowns and expansions. in the downtown area. At its root is historic preservation. So while maintaining the traditional assets of a community, Main Street recognizes the unique dynamic of a specific city. So you will have representation of not only what the community wants, but because it's grassroots, you have business owners like yourself who are driving the process and know the needs of that community. Next slide, please. Levels of service. Currently, the city of Fairburn has for 3 years straight received accreditation. So that is a wonderful achievement for our community. And we are looking towards becoming a classic community. How you become a classic community is, of course, the organizational component. That's why the Main Street Board working and functioning and being active either through the Development Authority or as a standalone board is very important. Next slide, please. So the Main Street approach is what most of you are familiar with. It deals with transformative strategies. How do you come into a community and transform that community? Using, again, addressing the unique challenges related to revitalization and redevelopment. In our case, we have not so much as a unique challenge, but a common challenge of engaging the private property owners. How to get them excited about what the overall vision of the city is, and how we translate that into bringing vitality to our downtown. We also look at transformative strategies of how do we bring tourists, how do we direct them to this as an area, a destination point, highlighting some of our natural assets, as well as those improvements that we've made throughout the city. So our program looks at that four-point approach. Next slide. And that four-point approach is based upon, of course, economic equality, which is our business recruitment and retention. It looks at organization, our structure. It looks at promoting. Our events, we always talk about our events are programmed based upon making sure our businesses are impacted positively and they continue to flourish. And then, of course, our design. We want to make sure there's continuity of design. So we work with technical experts and cross-disciplines to make sure that folks that are coming in are building where it complements the traditional assets of Fairburn. It feels like Fairburn. Next slide. So with that said, these are like the hard numbers. When we quantify this process, and that's one of the strengths of Main Street. The Main Street approach is not just touchy-feely, but there are some analytics that are involved, bringing the data and showing how these grassroots efforts help to drive policy. You can go to the next slide. One of the policies that we look at is downtown appeal and beautification is significant to how we drive those numbers. People want to come to downtowns, go to restaurants in areas that are appealing. So that's one of our initiatives. Another thing is our creative economies. We know that having a theater, having an education campus, having state-of-the-art educational schools like the STEM programs, having concerts that have cultural elements to it, that generates a creative economy. We have an active art advisory board that looks at beautification on a continual basis, and we have been able to implement quite a bit of projects through that program. Our creative crosswalks, those are all things that are appeal and reflect the diverse community that's Fairburn. Next slide. 2021, that impact exceeded $10 million. So when you look at everything that happened in Fairburn, that, according to the Department of Community Affairs, that is the impact from combining the improvements, the concerts, the activities. That's what that translates to. Next slide. Question, Mr. Hadaway?
I'd be curious to know how they came up with that number.
Yep. So the number is based upon improvements.
Okay.
It's based upon the events that take place, but more so the city's investment that year. The city invested, $6 million in a streetscapes project?
Sure.
And then there were other improvements. Every year we have to report, every month rather, we have to report on all of the improvements, the rehabilitations that take place with our businesses in our downtown area.
Okay.
We also have to report on how many events that we have per month. We also have to report on residential and commercial retail sales.
Okay.
So that reflects the overall impact. Yeah.
Got it.
Does that make
Understood.
sense?
Thank you. Yeah, so that's the spend, that's the investment that the
That's the
city's made.
investment.
I
So,
understand. Okay.
Yeah, for grassroots, it's comprehensive. It's
Sure.
saying it's not just one thing.
Right.
Kind of drives this process.
Understood. Thank you for that clarification.
Yes. These are the standards. So again, to your point, we just don't willy-nilly just come up with, we're gonna just, look at one thing. They have national standards that have trickled down to the state level. And these are the requirements in order for us to be an accredited program. We have to provide an affidavit of records that include annual assessment, our Main Street program, board meeting agendas. Everything that we submit to them is very specific and detailed, and we must maintain those files. Online trainings, another thing that makes these programs successful are the online trainings, which include Main Street 101. All of the board members are required to do Main Street 101. It gives more specific details about everything that I've mentioned today. So if the Development Authority so chooses to act as the authority of the board, Main Street 101 would be also a requirement, which means that each of you all would be certified, which is pretty much an hour course in Main Street, and you would receive a certification in that program. Next slide. So Main Street 101, these are the elements of the program. The information is free to access. And again, it's a 50-question exam. After they provide you with the information regarding Main Street, you would take a 50-minute test. Next slide. Next slide. And that's basically everything. So one of the, in terms of the previous committees that we've had, those committees have been based upon specific projects, but we've had committees in 4 areas. Of course, the design, economic vitality, organization, and promotions. Some of the projects that the design committee would look at is facade grants, wayfinding, banners, historic plaques, and that sort of thing. Our economic vitality would be business associations. We have been actively working to put together an alliance in Fairburn. The Main Street Board is one component, but an alliance where there would be regular meetings and a membership of sorts to keep that communication going amongst our small business owners. Another thing that we've looked at is workforce development. These different projects, like for instance, one of the projects that will be coming to the board about a relocation of an advanced manufacturing company, one key component of them deciding to come here is access to a skilled workforce. So this particular element or committee of the board would look at workforce, how to connect with our education nodes, and our community, our state and our county partners in terms of ongoing workforce development opportunities. In terms of organization, revolving loan grant and fundraising was a part of this. We just approved the Rotary Clock as a part of the beautification, and a component of that Rotary Clock is a fundraising component. One of the things that we want to look at as a development authority and is a way to continuously have fundraising mechanisms as a part of our ongoing work. And then finally, for promotions, Visitors Bureau, welcome packs, city guidebooks, events to welcome businesses. Wouldn't it be great if a letter, the mayor has initiated a letter campaign, but wouldn't it be great for us to have receptions for new businesses that come, where, we have ambassadors from the Development Authority to come out to those businesses and say hello, welcome, and kind of take them in the arms. So that is the need for those committees if the Development Authority so chooses to initiate those.
So is there a board in place now?
So there was a board in place, and we, at this point, we're in need of reactivating that board. Yeah. There were some changes in the folks moved out and et cetera, et cetera.
So there'll be, on the board will be people other than us as well, or members of our
Correct,
board?
yes. So if
Community members?
the Development Authority so chooses, we can have joint meetings as a way of handling, or the Development Authority can handle it through having just committees. You can say a design committee, and we put that design committee together.
And as far as allocation of funds and pursuance of projects and things like that, is that our purview?
Exactly, that would be
We would
regular
vote on-
reporting and updates to
Okay.
the board. So in addition to what you do as a Development Authority from the project's perspective, you would, on an ongoing, and that's something that was mentioned by one of the board members. So after we get past the projects, then what do we meet on? Where there are other things, these committees would be
Sure.
other aspects of Development Authority meetings. And that's in keeping with other cities.
And the structure of those committees, would they be fairly free to meet on their own accord? Do
And they
have
could
to
meet,
go
yes.
about-
Main Street Board does not have to do open records. They can meet,
Right.
you know, yeah, exactly.
That makes a lot more sense for those kind of ongoing efforts, right?
Exactly, exactly.
And I'm assuming that it would be okay for us to talk to anyone on the Main Street Board and speaking,
Yes.
not about things that we're doing like agenda-wise,
Right,
but
not Development Authority
Yeah,
matters, but
right.
as it relates to
Got it.
Main Street, yes.
That makes a lot more sense to structure it with those committees for that reason, is because we're not sort of
Right.
breach of our quorum if we're having to
Right.
meet on these constant things that need attention
Right.
frequently. So
Exactly.
that seems like the most efficient approach. Do we
And-
have some candidates in mind for some of these
Exactly. So we
committees?
do have some candidates, and another great thing about it, as centers of influence, it allows you to bring candidates as well.
Great.
So it is a win-win for all parties involved.
and how many, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You mentioned compliance, so in order for us to be compliant with, I take it as a national organization, then we have to have a board in place. So right now, we're not compliant.
No, we are compliant, because the Development Authority is,
We're doubling as that board
we're
right now.
doubling as a board, yeah, and that was something that was established back in 2017,
You have to get certified on an annual basis.
annual basis. So you still have a year to get certified.
But if we hand that to the committee, they get certified. Or we still have to be certified.
So, yes, and yes,
They and us,
exactly, both,
regardless.
regardless. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So that's another reason for bringing it up, because as a Development Authority, yes, you would all need to be certified as well. And that's not an expense to you, that's additional information, we just have to schedule those trainings.
Okay. The trainings that you just mentioned, the 101, okay. So as far as forming committees, selecting members, that order of business, what is
Yeah,
our
so
timeline
if it's
for
a go,
that?
I will basically go ahead and put those committees before each of you, and we'll go ahead and populate those with members, and we'll move forward with those respective agenda. Now, facade grant, for instance, is something that's coming up before the Development Authority period. So that's coming up. If there are any additional, needs to convene committees to deal with a specific aspect of it, then so be it in terms of beautification projects. But the facade grants, that is something that the Development Authority will decide in terms of who's awarded those grants. We do have applications that will be coming up in subsequent meetings.
Do we have design guidelines
We do,
to tether to that?
yes, we
Okay.
do.
That's good.
That's a wonderful thing that happened back a while ago through our Main Street program. The technical design team came out and looked. We have not only historic preservation guidance, but we have a paint palette as to recommendations for the historic properties, what those colors should be in keeping with the overall design continuity.
Great. Excellent.
I may have missed it, but how many people need to be on that committee?
On the Main Street Board, it can be 7 to 9, or it can be, I have heard of Main Street boards that are quite extensive, maybe 10 or 11 board members, and have different teams, and under each committee have even more. So, yeah, we do have some flexibility with that as well.
And I guess I would ask you this question. Do most cities, are they structured that way by the DDA having a committee?
So you can structure them where the DDA, well, based on my research, we haven't activated a DDA in Fairburn, so we haven't known. Usually what happens is the DDA is the one that administers the Main Street. Sometimes they split them out, because what happens is sometimes the development authority, in this case, or the DDA, will get bogged down in doing events and stuff like that, which is not the purpose. The purpose is economic development. So sometimes we separate them just so there's a clean line between what Main Street does as a promotional part of what your economic development is, and the true bricks and mortar of financing deals and incentivizing.
I like that.
So it just really depends on the community. It also depends on the workload for the staff as well, because that's two separate boards, two separate meetings, and something like that. So it really just depends on what the desire of each community is.
Got it.
Yep. Now, we do have a downtown development authority.
Great, we found the activating resolution.
Oh, yeah, I did. In fact,
Great.
it's been filed.
Perfect,
But, yeah.
cool. Well, that's good.
Yeah, but the information you're provided is great. But we do have a downtown development authority, and they act jointly, but they have been filed.
Going back to your slides, it looks as though there's like a boundary with like a map
Yes.
of that area. Do we have
So
a
one
visual of that?
Yes. One of the, I may not have it in that slide, but two things guide that. For the Main Street program, you must have a boundary, that we submit that map every year. And from a planning and zoning perspective, the downtown district or the overlay district is what defines that boundary. So that's in our municipal codes, as well as it is a part of our Main Street program. Why that is important is because there's certain both tax incentives as well as zoning requirements that are specific to the vision of downtown development and expansion.
It seems like, I don't know, maybe 18 months ago, we used to do the downtown development and the development authority meetings in tandem,
That's exactly right.
so that when one ended, the other one started. And
That's exactly right.
Okay.
So they were done that way. Mhm.
And the other thing is you mentioned the facade improvement program. Is there a maximum grant amount? And also, how much has the city of Fairburn been issued in total? I mean, do you all have a certain
Yes.
number you want to get out, and do you lose it if you don't use it?
So the city of Fairburn has a $50,000 facade grant program that it initiated this year, up to $10,000 matching for facade improvements. And we definitely want to make sure that all of those grants are awarded by the end of the fiscal year.
Which is, okay.
And how do we get that news out?
We have been getting that news out through business owners. We are and continuing to, because again, the facade grant is within the downtown district, so it's not citywide. We are also going to start promoting that more aggressively on our social media.
Got it. So I'm assuming if we had the committee, they could really be pushing it.
That's exactly right.
Got it.
What kind of discretion does that committee, or us in this case, have in issuing those grants? What level of discretion? I mean, is
So
it?
the Development Authority, I would say